It feels like social media is just everywhere these days, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Especially for young people. It's how we connect, find stuff out, maybe just kill time between things.
totally. It's completely woven into daily life.
But there's this question that keeps nagging away, right?
Yeah.
All this time we're spending scrolling and clicking, is it actually, good for us?
hmm
Or is it maybe making things harder mentally?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We've gone through a whole load of research, expert takes, trying to get a real sense of this relationship between social media and mental health for young people.
Hmm.
And spoiler alert, it's complicated. It's not just one thing.
Right. And we're not here to say social media bad, because that's obviously not the whole story for everyone.
Hmm.
The idea is to pull out the really key stuff from these sources,
Hmm.
things that might help you understand what's going on, maybe give you some tools to think about how you use it all.
Hmm.
So, okay, if we want to get our heads around this, where's a good place to start thinking about online life and, well, how we feel?
Well, a really good starting point is thinking about what makes any relationship healthy. Johns Hopkins Uni actually has this list of like 12 elements.
Okay.
And it's super interesting to see how those play out online or sometimes how they get kind of messed up online. Like communication, they point out how easy it is to misunderstand a text
Oh, so,
compared to talking face to face where you get the tone, the body language, everything.
God, yeah. How many fights started over a misinterpreted text? Happens all the time. What else is on that list? Boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries, those lines we draw, physical, emotional, mental, and online. Whoosh. Those can get so blurry, can't they?
Definitely. Like feeling you have to reply instantly.
Exactly. Or just feeling like you need to be on all the time. So actually deciding, okay, I'm checking out now, or I'm not going to look at that kind of content, or I'm only interacting with these people. That becomes really, really important for protecting your own headspace.
Makes sense.
Then there's consent, not just physical stuff, but online. Like, are you okay with how your photos are being used? Your info? Do you feel pressured to share stuff you'd rather keep private?
It's like that whole digital consent thing, right?
Yeah.
Clicking agree without really knowing what you're agreeing to.
Yeah.
And what about trust and honesty? That seems tricky online.
It's a massive challenge. People can put up these perfect looking versions of themselves or hide completely.
Yeah.
Building real trust there takes a different kind of awareness. You have to be more critical about who you're talking to.
Yeah, you really do.
Independence is another one. Even when you're super connected online, you still need that time for yourself or time with different people offline. It stops you from relying too much on just like one online group for everything.
It's so easy to just get lost in the feed and forget about,
Yeah.
well, being present. Like
Yeah.
right here, right now. What about equality?
Yeah, that give and take, even in online groups or planning things on socials, is everyone actually feel heard, feel respected. It applies there too.
Hmm.
And support that feeling of empathy, people having your back online and off. But Johns Hopkins makes a good point. You also need boundaries around giving support. You can't burn yourself out trying to fix everyone else's problems online.
That's a really important one. Responsibility.
Yep. What you say and do online matters. It has an impact. Owning up if you mess up online is just as important as offline.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And arguments happen, right? Even online. Healthy conflict is about how you handle disagreements respectfully, even in like a heated comment section.
Which is hard. And then safety, just feeling okay expressing yourself online without getting attacked or judged. That's pretty basic to feeling good about being online.
Yeah.
And finally, fun. Your connections should actually bring you some joy, not just leave you feeling drained.
So looking at all that, it really sounds like social media can be a total mixed bag for relationships. It can help and hinder.
That's pretty much it. It can amplify the good stuff, but also the bad. Miscommunication is easier without nonverbals. Trust is harder to build sometimes. Boundaries take real conscious effort. Right.
But then again, you can find amazing communities, maybe express yourself in ways you wouldn't offline. So the takeaway is really that you need to be mindful, develop some digital relationship skills almost.
Okay, so that's the relationship angle. What about studies looking directly at social media use and like diagnose mental health conditions?
Yeah.
What did that Cambridge study find?
Right, the Cambridge one. They found a pretty clear difference. Adolescents who reported having a mental health condition, they were using social media significantly more.
How much more?
They averaged around 3 to 4 hours a day, school days and weekends, compared to maybe 1 to 3 hours for kids without those conditions.
Wow, okay, that's quite a jump. But And this is important, right? The study didn't say that the extra scrolling caused the mental health problem.
Exactly. They were super careful about that.
Yeah.
No cause and effect established.
Yeah.
It could be that having mental health challenges leads you to use social media differently, maybe as a coping thing, or maybe your offline social life changes.
Or maybe some aspects of social media do contribute to symptoms, or most likely it's a bit of both, feeding into each other. It's complex. The main point is there's a link in usage patterns.
Got it. And this was a big study in the UK, how they measure the time.
Yeah, nationally representative NHS survey data, but it was self-reported, so the kids estimated their own screen time.
Ah,
And the researchers noted that, if you're feeling down or anxious, maybe you perceive time differently. Like maybe you feel like you've been online longer than you actually have. So it's a valuable finding, but maybe objective tracking could add more clarity down the line.
that makes sense. Perception can be tricky. And when they said all mental health conditions, what did that actually cover? Was it just anxiety and depression?
No, it was broader than that. It included internalizing stuff like anxiety and depression, yes, but also externalizing conditions like ADHD or conduct disorder and others too, like sleep problems, even psychosis, though those were fewer.
Okay, so the increased use wasn't necessarily linked just to feeling bad about online stuff. It could be connected to a whole range of different mental health experiences. Interesting. Okay, so connection, but no clear cause. What about the quality of online time? We hear toxic thrown around a lot. What does that actually mean in an online context?
Yeah, toxic. Harvard Health talks about toxic relationships in general as ones that leave you feeling like drained or negative or like it's all one-sided.
Right.
And you can totally apply that framework online. Think about those interactions that just consistently make you feel rubbish about yourself. That burnout after scrolling, the negative self-talk it kicks off, feeling ignored or put down in comments.
Yeah.
Those are signs things might be tipping into toxic territory online. The key thing is really how it makes you feel. That's the indicator.
That feeling of inadequacy after comparing yourself or getting sucked into those comment wars that just go nowhere good.
Yeah.
So if we spot those patterns, what can we do? How do we make online interactions healthier?
Dr. Jennifer Gatchell, also from Harvard, has some really practical tips we can adapt. First, be an empathetic listener. Online, that means really reading what people write, trying to get their perspective, acknowledging it.
So not just skimming and reacting.
Exactly. Sure, you've actually taken it in. Second, share the spotlight. If someone's sharing something tough online, keep the focus on them. Don't immediately jump in with your own story unless it's genuinely supportive, not just making it about you.
Good point.
Third, stay calm. If things get heated online, which they do, take a beat. Try to respond constructively. And if you feel yourself getting really wound up, just step away. It's okay. Come back later or don't. Managing your own reaction is huge.
That pause button is powerful.
So powerful. And she also mentions HLLT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Before you wade into a potentially stressful online thing, just check, am I any of those?
Yeah, because that definitely affects how you react.
Totally. Deal with the HALT first, another big one. Interact in person more. Don't let social media be your only social outlet. Video calls, phone calls, actually seeing people, it gives you so much more richness, less chance for misunderstanding.
You get the tone, the expressions.
Exactly. And finally, she says, emphasize the positive. Practice gratitude, express it online sometimes, leave a kind comment, thank someone. Research shows gratitude is genuinely good for your brain and relationships.
So actively trying to be a positive force online can actually help you too.
Yeah, it seems so. Being more mindful, setting those limits, bringing some positivity, it can all help navigate those trickier online spaces.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned finding community online, which can be amazing, especially for finding people who get you.
Definitely. Harvard T.H. Chan really highlights that, especially for marginalized groups. Finding that connection and understanding online can be incredibly important for mental well-being.
Finding your tribe, yeah.
But there's the flip side. Johns Hopkins Medicine talks about this trend of self-diagnosis. You see influencers, maybe on TikTok or Instagram, sharing their mental health stories, their symptoms.
Right.
And while that can be good for awareness, it can also lead people, especially young people, to think, oh, I have that anxiety or depression or ADHD, just based on watching a few videos.
This sounds relatable.
Exactly. But mental health is complex. An accurate diagnosis needs a proper assessment by a professional. These online accounts are just snippets, often oversimplified. Relying on them can mean you worry unnecessarily or try the wrong things or delay getting actual help.
And just constantly scrolling through hashtag mental health talk or whatever, even if you're trying to learn, could that backfire?
Johns Hopkins warns it absolutely can. It can actually increase anxiety or depression. You get hyper-focused on symptoms, not comparing yourself endlessly, maybe see stuff that's triggering. It messes with sleep, too. Their advice: notice how you feel when you're online. If it's making you anxious, step back. Prioritize connecting with people you actually know, rather than getting lost in content from strangers that might be overwhelming or misleading. Be critical about your sources.
So community, yes, valuable support there potentially, but be really careful about diagnosing yourself from a TikTok video. If you're worried, talk to a professional.
That's the key message. Always go pro for diagnosis and treatment advice.
Okay. So we talked about boundaries in relationships earlier. How does that translate specifically to, like, managing our digital lives?
The University of Michigan talks about boundaries as pure self-care, setting guidelines so you feel safe and comfortable, and that applies just as much online.
So what does that look like practically?
It means things like consciously setting time limits on apps, deciding who you follow and unfollowing accounts that make you feel bad, managing notifications so your phone isn't buzzing constantly.
Yeah, turning those off helps.
Definitely. Choosing not to engage with certain types of content, and crucially, taking actual breaks, like phone off, screen down breaks. You're in control of your digital space. Setting boundaries is how you exercise that control.
It's about being intentional, not just reactive.
Yeah.
Okay. So lots of challenges. Let's talk about something potentially really positive. Gratitude. How does that fit in?
Gratitude is powerful. Loads of sources. Greater Good, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, UCL, they all point to huge benefits. Better health, more happiness, appreciating good things more, stronger relationships, more optimism, being kinder.
That's a lot of good stuff. How do we actually do gratitude, especially if we're trying to counter some online negativity?
A classic is the gratitude journal. Just taking a few minutes regularly to write down things you're thankful for, big or small. Writing it down seems to deepen the impact.
Right.
Johns Hopkins also has this cool stop, look, go idea. Just pause sometimes during the day. Stop, look around and notice something good, something you appreciate. Really take it in. Then go carry on with your day with that little boost.
Like a mini mental reset. I like that.
Exactly. And UCL looked at gratitude apps for young adults. They found structured prompts like thinking about gratitude related to connection or peace and calm can be really helpful if you're starting out. But open journaling works too. The point is finding a way that clicks for you. You can even express gratitude online, like we said before.
So making that conscious effort to notice the good, whether in a journal or just in your head, can be a real counterbalance.
Yeah, it trains your brain to focus differently, builds resilience. Now, something often linked with youth and social media is depression. What should we know about how depression shows up in young people?
Origin points out it's not always just sadness. It can be persistent irritability, just feeling unhappy most of the time, losing interest in things you used to love, big changes in appetite or sleep, feeling restless or exhausted all the time, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, trouble concentrating, even dark thoughts about life not being worth living. It's a major shift, not just feeling blue for a day.
And there are behavioral signs too, right?
Yeah, things like pulling away from friends and family, grades dropping at school or trouble at work, maybe increased substance use, being way more moody or irritable than usual, saying a lot of negative stuff about themselves or the future.
It's so important not to just dismiss those as teen angst or whatever.
Exactly. They could be signs of something serious needing support. And like we've touched on, social media can sometimes mirror these issues. Someone might withdraw online too, or potentially worsen them through comparison or bullying.
Which leads us to, okay, how do we protect teens? How do we make this online world safer for their mental health? What's the advice?
Well, Vicki Harrison from Stanford Medicine suggests delaying access to social media as long as you reasonably can, and then introduce it gradually as kids mature, like you would with other responsibilities.
Why the delay?
Because adolescence is such a key time for figuring out who you are. Teens are naturally more focused on peers, seeking validation, which makes them more vulnerable to the pressures and comparisons online. Giving them more time to build a solid sense of self offline first can be protective.
That makes sense. It lines up with the Surgeon General's advisory, too, calling on platforms to build in safeguards.
Right. Things like designing features with teen mental health in mind. Maybe fewer endless scrolls or constant notifications. Providing actual mental health resources right there on the platform.
And Stanford has been doing work on this, involving young people themselves, right?
Yeah.
In workshops.
Yeah, which is great. Getting their input is vital. They developed this framework, the Integrated Harm Framework, and it specifically lists psychological impacts, depression, anxiety, loneliness, lower self-esteem, as a key harm linked to youth social media use.
So what can be done? What are the mitigation strategies they talked about?
A whole range, actually.
Hmm.
Empowering kids through education on healthy online habits, giving parents better tools and resources, getting communities and platforms working together on digital literacy, giving users more control over the content they see, designing platforms for more intentional use, not just endless scrolling, providing easy access to helplines on the platform itself, having youth-specific guidelines, being more transparent with data for research, getting the tech industry to collaborate more, and crucially, keeping young people involved in the research and design process.
Wow, so it's really a multi-pronged approach, not just one solution.
Definitely sounds like it. It's not just on the individual teens. Platforms and the wider community have a big role to play in making things safer.
Absolutely. So wrapping this all up, this deep dive, it's clear there's no simple answer to whether social media is help or harm for young people's mental health.
No, it's really nuanced. You've got the potential for connection, for finding community, which is huge. But then you have the risks, the comparisons, the misinformation leading to self-diagnosis, the way it can sometimes worsen anxiety or depression.
Yeah. So the big takeaway seems to be awareness. Understanding both sides, the potential upsides and the real downsides, that allows you as a young person to be more intentional.
Right. Being proactive, setting those boundaries we talked about, being mindful when you are online, maybe consciously bringing in some gratitude, and really prioritizing those face-to-face connections too.
And perhaps the most critical point, if you are struggling, if things feel overwhelming, social media is not the place to get primary mental health support.
Definitely not. Reaching out to a trusted adult, a doctor, a counselor, that's the move. Get professional help.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about everything we've covered today, what's maybe one small, deliberate change you could try in how you use social media, specifically to support your own mental well-being, something to mull over as you navigate that online world? Okay, so think about the last time you were, just scrolling through your social media feed. Did you click away feeling like more connected? Or maybe a bit weird. Or, I don't know, questioning things after seeing someone's perfect highlight reel.
Yeah, that feeling is super common, isn't it?
Yeah.
It hits on this really big question we all grapple with. What's the real deal between our mental health and, well, all this time we spend online?
Exactly. And that's what we're really going to dive into today.
We're exploring that really intricate link between mental health and social media. We've looked at quite a bit of material, stuff like research studies focusing on young people, expert views on, what healthy relationships look like now in this digital age.
Yeah, we've got some fascinating sources. There's research from Cambridge University looking at adolescent social media use and mental health. Then there are perspectives from places like Johns Hopkins and Harvard on building good connections, whether they're online or off.
Right. And discussions from Stanford about youth safety and digital well-being. Plus info from Origin on understanding depression in young people.
And we also looked into positive psychology, gratitude, positive thinking from Harvard, greater good in action, Hopkins, and practical advice too on self-care, boundaries from Michigan and Stanford. So quite a range.
Definitely. And, our goal isn't to just say social media is good or bad. It's way more complicated than that, obviously.
Yeah.
We want to give you a clearer picture of the potential impacts, the upsides and the downsides, and really equip you with ways to navigate it all, for your own mental health.
Okay, great. Let's try and unpack this first part. We're calling it the double-edged scroll. Because it really feels that way, doesn't it?
It really does.
On one hand, it can be a source of genuine connection. Harvard research points out that for lots of people, maybe especially marginalized groups, it offers a community a sense of belonging they might struggle to find offline.
That's such a crucial point. It really does provide these valuable spaces for connection and support. But there's another side. A study from the University of Cambridge found something interesting. Their findings suggest that adolescents who report having mental health conditions tend to spend, on average, more time on social media, like maybe 3 to 4 hours on a school day.
Compared to those without those challenges.
Right, who reported more like 1 to 2 or maybe 2 to 3 hours.
Okay, but here's the really important bit, right? The researchers are super careful not to say social media causes the mental health issue.
Exactly, it's a correlation.
It could easily be the other way around, couldn't it? Maybe young people already struggling are turning to social media more as a coping thing, or just their main way to connect.
That's a really key question. It just shows how complex this is. Social media can be this, readily available outlet. It offers a connection, even if it's sometimes a bit superficial. especially for someone feeling isolated or anxious offline. So yeah, the higher usage might be more of a symptom, not the root cause itself.
And didn't the Cambridge researchers also mention something about perception? Like young people with mental health conditions might just feel like they spend more time online?
Yes, exactly. Self-reported data is useful, but it can be colored by how we're feeling. If you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe you perceive your screen time as way higher, even if it's objectively similar to your peers.
Hmm. Makes you think. It highlights the need for like a bigger picture view, considering both how people feel and what the actual usage data shows.
A holistic view.
So related to this, Stanford medicine experts have suggested delaying or at least limiting social media for teens for as long as possible, basically, introducing it more gradually as they get older. What's the thinking there?
Well, it comes down to adolescent development. The
Yeah.
Stanford experts stress that, a huge part of being a teenager is figuring out who you are, your identity.
Hmm.
And teens are naturally really tuned into what their peers think. They're looking for acceptance, for validation, and that heightened sensitivity can make them pretty vulnerable to the pressures, the social comparisons that just get amplified on social media.
Which, yeah, leads perfectly into this next bit, the comparison trap and self-diagnosis. That Cambridge study found lots of participants agreed with things like, I compare myself to others on social media. It's almost built in, isn't it? You see these curated lives.
It's incredibly common. And seeing those, idealized versions of reality all the time can definitely feed feelings of inadequacy or anxiety, maybe even contribute to depression. And layered on top of that is this growing trend, highlighted by Johns Hopkins Medicine, of self-diagnosing based on social media content, especially, it seems, on platforms like TikTok.
Right. You see influencers sharing their mental health journeys, which can be, genuinely helpful for awareness, reducing stigma.
Definitely positive aspects there.
But it also means viewers might see a few symptoms described in a short video and think, oh, that's me.
Yeah, Johns Hopkins gave a good example. Someone watches a creator talk about finding social interactions difficult, and they jump to thinking they have autism. But, difficulties with social interaction can stem from lots of things. It doesn't automatically mean a specific diagnosis like autism.
And that's where it gets risky, right? It's not about saying someone's feelings aren't valid, but just getting a real diagnosis needs a professional evaluation. You can't really get the full picture from online content alone.
Precisely. Oversimplifying complex conditions, they mention things like bipolar disorder or OCD, can lead to real misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Maybe not getting the right kind of help. Plus, just being constantly exposed to potentially triggering stuff or those endless comparisons, it can really worsen existing anxiety or depression.
Okay, so if these online interactions are so, well, tricky, how do the basics of healthy relationships even apply online? Because we are forming relationships there, even if they feel different.
That's a really vital connection to make. Johns Hopkins Student Wellbeing talks about the core elements: good communication, clear boundaries, trust, honesty, support. These aren't just for face-to-face stuff. They're just as important online.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Whether it's in person or through a screen, feeling drained or overwhelmed or like you're not being seen, those are usually signs the relationship isn't working well for you.
And maybe even more important online is that clear communication and having boundaries.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the tone of voice, the body language.
Right, things get misinterpreted so easily.
Exactly. A text meant lightly could land really critically.
Harvard Health actually uses the word toxic for some online dynamics. Feeling burnt out after interacting, having negative thoughts, feeling like it's unbalanced or you're not valued or respected. I bet that resonates with people.
I think it does. And if you notice those patterns, Harvard's advice is pretty straightforward. Limit your exposure, especially if a specific online relationship feels consistently stressful. They really push for prioritizing direct communication, like actually talking in person or on the phone or video. It tends to be less contentious than back and forth texting or commenting.
Okay, so we've hit some challenges and how relationship basics still apply. What about actively building up our resilience, positive habits to navigate all this better?
Yeah, this is where things like gratitude really come in. Both Greater Good in Action and Johns Hopkins highlight how powerful gratitude is for our overall well-being and for our relationships, too. Just regularly noticing and expressing thanks can genuinely lift our mood, make us happier, and even strengthen those social bonds.
I have heard about keeping a gratitude journal. Is that actually, effective?
Research suggests it really is. It makes you intentionally focus on the good things, the stuff you might just take for granted otherwise. And that deliberate focus can kind of shift your whole emotional baseline. And apparently actually writing it down, helps solidify it.
Interesting. Johns Hopkins also mentioned a stop, look, go gratitude practice. What's that?
Oh yeah, it's a simple mindfulness thing. You
Hmm.
just stop what you're doing for a moment, look around, and actively find something positive, something to appreciate, and then you go on with your day, carrying that feeling. And they point out real benefits too. Gratitude's linked to releasing feel-good brain chemicals like serotonin and dopamine. It might even help you sleep better or feel less pain.
Wow, it's amazing how small practices can have those kinds of, well, physical effects. It links up with what Harvard Health says about positive thinking, too, right? They mention optimism being linked to lower risk of dying from various diseases.
Absolutely. Cultivating a more positive outlook seems to have real payoffs for mental and physical health. And mindfulness, which Harvard also talks about, is another key skill. Just focusing on the present, without judgment, helps cut down stress and quiet that mental noise that social media can sometimes amplify.
And it all seems to circle back to basic self-care, doesn't it? Harvard and Stanford's Be Well program both stress taking care of the fundamentals, getting exercise, mindfulness, good sleep, healthy food.
Exactly. Those are crucial for managing stress from any source, including tricky online interactions.
Yeah.
When we look after our overall well-being, we're just better equipped to handle the complexities of all our relationships, online ones included.
Okay, so we know some pitfalls. We've talked about building our inner resources. What about some concrete strategies for actually using social media more healthfully?
Right, boundaries, that's key. Both Harvard Health and the University of Michigan really hammer this home. Boundaries are just, the limits you set to feel safe and comfortable. That applies online too. Maybe it's time limits, maybe it's being choosy about when or how you engage.
That makes sense. Just being more aware of what leaves you feeling good versus not so good online.
Mm-hmm. Johns Hopkins advises really tuning into your emotions while you're scrolling. If certain accounts or types of content consistently make you feel bad, maybe unfollow them. And consciously try to prioritize connecting with people you actually know in real life. That can make a big difference to your well-being.
I like that idea Stanford mentioned about customizable content controls. Giving people more say over what pops up in their feed seems like a good move.
It's definitely promising. And Stanford also talked about designing these digital spaces more intentionally for more valuable use. Things like making it easier to toggle push notifications on or off, maybe even defaulting them to off for younger users, could really help reduce that constant pull, allow for more mindful use.
And this really has to be a conversation, doesn't it? Especially between parents and kids. Johns Hopkins and Stanford both stressed how important open communication is about social media, just encouraging young people to share how they're feeling, what they're seeing, and educating them about mental health in this digital context.
Yeah, absolutely vital. And that suggestion from Harvard T.H. Chan and Stanford about actually involving young people in designing the platforms, that's really compelling. I mean, who knows better what they need for their well-being than the users themselves?
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial point. Actually understanding depression in young people, because sometimes how we feel, maybe after being online, could signal something more serious.
Right. Origin and Harvard Health offer good insights here. It's important to note depression in young people doesn't always look like sadness, especially in teens. It can often show up as increased irritability or losing interest in things they used to love, big changes in appetite or sleep, feeling tired all the time, feelings of worthlessness, trouble concentrating, lots of negative thoughts.
And that irritability and anger point that Harvard mentioned for teens, that's easy to just dismiss as typical teenager stuff, but it could be more.
Exactly. And also pulling away socially, having more trouble with relationships, those are potential signs too. And while social media can offer connection, if the engagement is excessive or really negative, it could unfortunately make feelings of isolation worse or contribute to other depression risk factors. It's just so important for parents, friends, and young people themselves to be aware of these signs and, seek professional help if they're worried.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things, the key takeaways you think we should really hold on to about this whole mental health and social media picture?
I think the biggest thing is recognizing it's complex. It's not black and white, good or bad. How it affects us really depends on how we use it, our own vulnerabilities, the quality of our interactions online. So self-awareness is huge. Really paying attention to how it makes you feel, setting those boundaries, time limits, content choices is essential. And focusing on healthy relationships, online and offline, gives us crucial support. And underlying all that is prioritizing overall well-being through self-care, sleep, nutrition, doing things you enjoy. That builds a stronger base for navigating everything.
That's really well put and practical too. So for you listening, maybe just take a second to think about your own habits. Are there accounts you follow that consistently bring you down? Could you maybe try setting a timer? Or even just try that simple gratitude practice we talked about? And please, really, if you are struggling or worried about how social media is affecting you, reach out. Talk to friends, family, or a mental health professional. It's always okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. And maybe just one final thought to leave you with. We live in a world that's increasingly mediated by screens, right? So how can we be more intentional about making our digital environments places that actually support our well-being, that foster real connection instead of taking away from it?
It's a big question, but one worth thinking about in your own life.